It's been a while since I made a video, but I don't really feel inclined to apologize all that much since my following base is non-existent for obvious reasons. I suppose I'd like to start this video off by clarifying the fact that this video will be more conversational and henceforth speculatory rather than anything enveloped in intense raw evidence. I think this is something I'd like to do more of in the future, but who knows. I thought that an interesting question to develop on would be something that people have likely heard a lot about already, including myself. What I'm hinting at specifically is the question posed by many religious institutions, but most prevalently in the United States by Christianity. The question being of how there can be any solid moral foundation and therefore morals for those who don't believe in God, or, any other higher deity. Now, I feel that a lot of people regurgitate this argument don't exactly do so with the knowledge of the process of thinking that leads to this statement in the first place. So I think we'd be good starting off examining the surface level basis of this argument. Obviously, for the religious individual, the question of morality is quite clear, as God is the absolute existence. Therefore, this gives a sort of reference point for everything in existence and conveniently even gives a list of moral guidelines sometimes, such as when we look at the Ten Commandments. However, for the non-theists, the idea of a moral foundation cannot so easily be ascertained, as not only is there no blatant guideline for human conduct, but simply no absolute existence of which one might rationalize a single objective morality. One might simply argue that despite the fact no absolute being exists, they are confident in their own morality, and that the suggestion is preposterous. But the argument I seek to make is not to rob anyone of their justification for morality, but truly derive where it sort of comes from in a way. Although I do want to further elaborate on how the rejection of an absolute morality does have some solid claims behind it. First, for the sake of this argument, I will presuppose that there's no higher being. Rationalism, I believe, is the best way to effectively see this. So, rationalism in simple terms prioritizes the absolute knowledge of an individual, encouraging that all decision making be made from a cosmic perspective, one only grounded in rational thinking, hence the name. A purely rationalist train of thought will generally lead you to the conclusion of nihilism, the belief that nothing has objective value. An example of this sort of conclusion can be made by simply asking why over and over. Take your favorite food, for example. I ask you, what is your favorite food? And this is a boring answer, but let's say that you say an apple. So then I ask, why? You say, I like the taste. I ask, why? You answer, because I am genetically predisposed and environmentally honed by my experiences to enjoy apples. I know I skipped a couple steps there, but this is for the sake of just making this video short. So then I ask again, why? And you answer, because I am encouraged by my biology to consume food which will nourish my own body. And then I ask you why, and you answer, because I want to live. So we see here that once we arrive to the question of living, which all forms of human experience tend to devolve into, once we apply the rationalist cosmic perspective, removing our own biology from the equation, such as the inherent fear of death, we sort of come to the conclusion that there's really no basis in our own value, or really anything whatsoever, at least from our perspective. Of course, the Christian response can be pretty easily ordained as it being God's will, which is almost funny how simple but also comforting it can be. And while we sort of went off course there, the cosmic rationalist perspective leads us to this general conclusion that nothing has any inherent value or purpose, and that these labels we often apply to things are really to satisfy our own desire for some sort of reason to live. Now you can likely see how the theist argument against the non-theist lack of moral foundation, assuming their suggestions are true, really do seem to be substantial in a lot of ways. I mean, after all, it often seems like general morality reflects the Ten Commandments in many ways in modern society. I mean, it would be hard to find a person in the modern era that believes in needless killing or the idea that one shouldn't treat another how they themselves want to be treated. And this kind of goes off track, but for the latter point of treating others how you want to be treated, I think a little bit of rationality is required because a masochist's idea of pleasure isn't exactly their neighbor's, but I kind of just wanted to bring that part up. So this brings us back to the original question. Can morality be possible without the solidarity that comes with the absoluteness of a divine being which determines these things for us? And before I give my answer, I want to consider this from the theist view that moral foundation is encoded into sort of our biology, rather than being something you're subject to only if you're following the religion. I'm going to have to argue yes, but not in any satisfactory capacity that the non-theist might hope for, and certainly not in any objective, universally true sense. Morality is always changing, just like every other aspect of the human experience over the years. While I'm sure a lot of pedophiles and sexists love to use this to try and rationally justify what's inherently irrational, henceforth being our emotions, is what I'm trying to say from that. It's a fact that the moral landscape of the world 150 years ago is incredibly different from today's, even with regards to religious communities. This conclusion is scary in a way, in the fact that it seems morality is often a mechanism of serving the current human social landscape, rather than actually leading any and all ideologies to a single point of goodness. Furthermore, it seems pretty obvious that someone's morality can be as easily determined by their birth location, parental influence, social media, or other such superficial factors. And all this seems to suggest that there's this absence of an objective morality that humanity is inherently attracted to without a deity. I think that despite all of this, humans are evidently a social creature. They can find comfort in knowledge in others, and in general, tend towards community in a fear of causing harm given at least the consequences. While morality without God seems to fall to a system of averages, morphing into what the majority deem right, this conclusion shouldn't just immediately lead you into despair. I think the best we can do is look at the world around us and decide, upon reasonable deliberation, but not exactly purely rationalist foundations, how we can make it better. While a cosmic perspective may make my final statement seem naive, should your goal be to live a fulfilling life, it would only be rational to be a little irrational, perhaps even existential. But at any ends, that's all I have to say.